Stay quiet and follow me. Danielle Brooks barely moved her lips as she passed behind Vincent Callahan's chair, and for the first time in 11 years, the most feared man in Chicago obeyed an order without asking why. It was 11:47 on a cold November night, and the last guests were finishing their whiskey beneath the amber chandeliers of the Callahan estate. Crystal glasses caught the firelight. Low voices drifted across the 30-foot dining room. Everything looked controlled, expensive, ordinary. Danielle knew it wasn't. Her fingers tightened around the silver serving tray as she crossed toward the kitchen, forcing herself not to look back. Minutes earlier, she had seen Ethan Cole, Vincent's closest advisor, slip a small brass key into the hand of a security officer near the west hallway. That hallway had been locked for years. Danielle knew because she had polished its mahogany doors every Tuesday for 8 months. No one used them. No one except, apparently, the men who believed a maid never noticed anything. Behind her, a chair moved softly across the hardwood floor. Vincent was following. Danielle kept walking. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe dignity and justice still matter, hit like and subscribe. Now back to Danielle. She pushed through the service door and entered the narrow corridor behind the kitchen. The music from the dining room faded. Vincent's footsteps remained steady behind her. Where are we going? His voice was low, controlled. Danielle didn't answer. Not yet. She passed the laundry room, descended a short staircase, and stopped beside an old storage closet beneath the west wing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 8 months of keeping her eyes down had taught her something the powerful rarely understood. Invisible people see everything. She set down the tray and reached behind a row of folded table linens. Vincent watched as she removed a small iron key she had found there that afternoon. His expression changed. Where did you get that? Danielle finally met his eyes. Please trust me for 30 seconds. No employee spoke to Vincent Callahan that way. Yet, something in her steady gaze stopped him from interrupting. Danielle inserted the key into a door disguised as darkwood paneling. Click. Vincent's eyes narrowed. He had lived in this house for 12 years. He had never known the door existed. Danielle pulled it open. Cold air drifted from the darkness beyond. She found the switch. A single overhead light flickered on. Vincent stepped beside her and stopped. His face went still. On the far wall were photographs of his house, his cars, his meetings, and his private schedule marked in careful handwriting. But Danielle wasn't looking at Vincent anymore. She was staring at the photograph pinned in the center of the wall. It wasn't a picture of him. It was a picture of her. 8 months earlier, Danielle Brooks had arrived at the Callahan estate before sunrise with a second-hand coat, a carefully printed resume, and one rule she had learned long before stepping through those iron gates. Never confuse being unnoticed with being unimportant. The estate sat outside Chicago behind acres of winter-bare trees and a stone wall taller than any person Danielle knew. Inside, everything seemed designed to remind visitors who held the power. Marble floors reflected chandeliers. Dark mahogany covered the walls. Even the silence felt expensive. Danielle had needed the job badly enough not to be impressed. She was 29, practical, patient, and accustomed to working in places where people remembered the spotless room but forgot the person who cleaned it. Mrs. Eleanor Price, the head housekeeper, explained the rules during Danielle's first morning. Staff used the service entrances. Private offices remained private. Questions were discouraged. Discretion was expected. Danielle simply nodded. She could follow rules. What no one explained was how quickly wealthy people stopped noticing someone carrying towels or collecting empty glasses. Within weeks, Danielle could enter a room and watch conversations continue as though she were furniture. She learned that Vincent Callahan drank coffee without sugar, rarely raised his voice, and could silence an entire dining table merely by setting down his glass. She learned that his employees watched his face before answering difficult questions. She learned that his closest advisor, Ethan Cole, never seemed nervous around him. Ethan had been beside Vincent for 11 years, long enough that people treated his presence as permanent. He was polished, courteous, and always remembered Danielle's name, but something about him bothered her. Not because he was rude, because he was careful. Too careful. He smiled before entering crowded rooms and stopped smiling the moment he believed no one important was watching. Danielle noticed habits. Her father, Marcus Brooks, had taught her that when she was young, people can rehearse words. He used to say, but habits tell the truth. So Danielle noticed Ethan touching his left wrist whenever Vincent asked about schedules. She noticed him checking doors after meetings. She noticed that during the previous month he had begun using the West Corridor, a part of the estate Mrs. Price claimed had been closed for years. The first time Danielle saw him there, Ethan smiled and said he had taken a wrong turn. Danielle said nothing. The second time, he was carrying an old brass key. Again, she said nothing. Then one Tuesday afternoon, while dusting the west hallway, Danielle stopped beside a painting she had straightened every week since taking the job. It was crooked by less than an inch. Most people would never have seen it. Danielle did. She adjusted the frame, then froze. The dust along its lower edge had been disturbed, and beneath it, almost hidden against the dark wood, was a fresh fingerprint. Someone had moved that painting recently. Danielle stared down the empty corridor, listening to the old house settle around her. For the first time since arriving, being invisible no longer felt safe. Danielle left the painting exactly as she found it. She did not touch the fingerprint, did not search behind the frame, and did not give anyone a reason to wonder why a housekeeper had spent too long in an empty hallway. She simply lifted her cleaning basket and walked away. But from that afternoon forward, the West Corridor began collecting questions. 3 days later, Danielle found a faint line of dried mud near the baseboard, no wider than the edge of a quarter. The weather outside had been dry all week. The following Monday, the old brass handle on the service stairwell was clean where months of dust should have covered it. Then came the smell. Coffee, fresh and bitter, drifting from a section of the house that supposedly had not been used in years. Danielle mentioned the corridor to Mrs. Eleanor Price while they folded table linens in the laundry room. She kept her voice casual. Has maintenance been working in the West Wing? Mrs. Price stopped folding. Only for a second, but Danielle saw it. No, I thought someone might be using the service stairs. Mrs. Price placed a white napkin onto the stack with unusual precision. That part of the house is closed. Danielle waited. I saw Mr. Cole there twice. This time Mrs. Price looked directly at her. The older woman's expression held no surprise. That frightened Danielle more than surprise would have. Forget what you saw. For quiet words. Nothing more. Mrs. Price picked up another napkin and continued folding. Danielle did the same, but something inside her shifted. Mrs. Price knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to be afraid of a hallway. Danielle stopped asking questions. Instead, she watched. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan's routine developed a pattern. On nights when Vincent held private meetings, Ethan disappeared for 7 or 8 minutes shortly after the guests moved into the dining room. He always returned through a different entrance. Once, Danielle passed him near the kitchen and noticed pale gray dust along the shoulder of his charcoal suit, the same color as the plaster near the unused service staircase. Ethan caught her looking. Long night, Danielle? He asked pleasantly. Yes, sir. His smile remained in place. Best not to work too hard. People notice things when they are tired that are not really there. Danielle held his gaze for one measured second. I will remember that. She walked away without changing pace. Her hands did not begin trembling until she reached the pantry. That evening, after the house settled into silence, Danielle returned to the West Corridor to collect a vase she had deliberately left there. She found something beside the service door. A scrap of cream-colored paper, burned along one edge, had been pushed beneath a radiator. Most of the writing was gone, but 3 things remained readable: a date, the initials V.C., and the words private schedule. Danielle stared at it without touching it. Vincent Callahan's initials. Vincent Callahan's schedule. Hidden in a corridor no one was supposed to use. Then a floorboard creaked behind her. Danielle straightened slowly. Mrs. Price stood at the end of the hallway, pale beneath the amber wall lights. She did not ask what Danielle had found. She only whispered, "You need to leave this alone." Danielle looked from the frightened housekeeper to the burned paper. Why? Mrs. Price's eyes moved toward the dark service staircase. Because someone in this house already knows you are paying attention. Mrs. Price disappeared before Danielle could ask another question, leaving only the soft rhythm of her footsteps fading toward the kitchen. Danielle stood beneath the amber lights and felt the warning settle over her. Someone knew she was paying attention. The sensible choice was obvious. Go home. Return the next morning. Clean the rooms assigned to her, and forget the West Corridor existed. Danielle had survived difficult years by knowing when pride was too expensive. But this was not pride. Someone had hidden Vincent Callahan's private schedule in a place his own staff had been told was abandoned, and Ethan Cole had been walking through that same place with a key. Danielle returned to her room that night, without touching the burned paper. She slept badly. By morning, it was gone. No ash. No scrap. Nothing beneath the radiator except polished hardwood. For the next 6 days, the house became perfectly normal. Too normal. Ethan stayed away from the West Wing. Mrs. Price avoided Danielle's eyes. The painting remained straight. Even the old service door collected a thin layer of dust again. Danielle almost convinced herself to stop looking. Then, on the night of Vincent's private dinner, everything changed. Shortly after 11:30, Danielle entered the dining room carrying a tray of fresh glasses. Vincent sat at the head of the long mahogany table beneath warm chandelier light, his white shirt bright beneath a charcoal jacket, his expression unreadable as 6 trusted men spoke around him. Ethan sat on his right, calm, smiling. Danielle moved quietly along the wall. Invisible again. That was when she saw Ethan's left hand disappear beneath the table. He removed a small brass key from his pocket and passed it behind his chair to a security officer standing near the west hallway. The officer closed his fingers around it without looking down. Danielle nearly missed the exchange. Nearly. The security officer left the room 2 minutes later. Ethan continued discussing business as though nothing had happened. Danielle carried the empty tray toward the kitchen, but instead of entering, she paused beside the service corridor. A door clicked somewhere beyond the wall. Then another. Her pulse quickened. She waited until the security officer returned to the dining room. His jacket carried a faint streak of gray plaster across one sleeve. Danielle knew that dust. She had seen it near the old staircase. When he passed her, something small fell from his pocket and landed silently beside the baseboard. A second key. He did not notice. Danielle waited until he disappeared around the corner, then picked it up with the edge of her apron. 20 minutes later, while the guests finished their whiskey, she slipped downstairs alone. The key opened the storage closet. Behind folded linens, Danielle found an iron lock she had never seen before. The second key turned smoothly. A section of dark wood paneling released with a quiet click. Cold air touched her face. Danielle reached inside and found a light switch. What appeared beneath the single overhead bulb made her forget to breathe. Photographs covered the far wall. Vincent entering restaurants. Vincent leaving meetings. Vincent standing beside his car. Printed schedules were arranged by date. Notes recorded arrival times, departures, names, addresses. On a nearby table sat photographs of the estate, its gates, its private rooms, even Vincent's young son leaving for school. Danielle's stomach tightened. Then she saw an empty space on the wall where one photograph appeared to have been removed recently. Footsteps sounded above her. She shut off the light, locked the hidden door, and returned upstairs. At 11:47, she crossed the dining room with a silver tray in her hands and whispered to Vincent. Now, standing beside him inside that secret room, Danielle watched his cold composure disappear as he studied the wall for himself. His eyes moved from his schedule to his son, then toward the center. Danielle followed his gaze. The empty space was no longer empty. Someone had replaced the missing photograph during the few minutes she had been upstairs. It showed Danielle walking through the estate gates that morning. Beneath her picture, typed neatly on a white card, were 3 words. She notices everything. Vincent did not speak for several seconds. Danielle had seen powerful men fill silence with anger, questions, or orders, but Vincent Callahan simply stared at the white card beneath her photograph. She notices everything. The words were not a description. They were a warning. His eyes moved slowly across the room again, studying every photograph as if seeing his own life from the perspective of a stranger. Then he turned to Danielle. "How long has your picture been here?" "It was not here when I found this room 20 minutes ago." Vincent's expression hardened. "You were here before you brought me down?" "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." He stepped toward the table, careful not to disturb anything. "Who knows you found this place?" Danielle thought of Mrs. Price. "Ethan, the security officer, the missing burned paper." "I do not know." Vincent looked at her sharply. For 8 months, Danielle had watched that look make employees lower their eyes. She did not. "That is not an answer. It is the only honest answer I have." The room became still. Vincent studied her differently now. Suspicion had entered his face. Danielle understood why. She had brought him to a hidden room inside his own estate. She possessed a key she should never have had. Her photograph was displayed beside information about his family. From where he stood, coincidence was becoming difficult to believe. Why? Would someone be watching you? He asked. Danielle swallowed. I was hoping you could tell me. You expect me to believe you know nothing about this? The question hurt more than she expected, but she refused to defend herself with desperation. She had spent too much of her life watching people like Vincent mistake fear for guilt. No, she said quietly. I expect you to believe whatever the evidence gives you reason to believe. His eyes narrowed. Danielle pointed toward the wall. But if you think I arranged this, ask yourself why I would bring you here. Vincent said nothing. Do not trust me, she continued. Her voice remained steady now. Trust what you saw. Something changed in his expression. Not acceptance. Not yet. But the automatic distance between employer and employee cracked slightly. Vincent removed his phone and made one quiet call. Daniel Mercer. Come to the West Service entrance alone. Tell no one where you are going. He ended the call. Danielle recognized the name. Mercer handled Vincent's private records and rarely visited the estate. 25 minutes later, the three of them stood around a laptop in a locked office 2 floors above the hidden room. Mercer searched employment records, property access logs, and archived security files while Vincent watched without blinking. Danielle sat across from them, still wearing her black work uniform, feeling strangely out of place beside polished leather and dark oak. Then Mercer stopped typing. There is a problem. Vincent leaned closer. What problem? Mercer turned the screen toward him. Miss Brooks was being documented before she worked here. Danielle felt the air leave her lungs. The first photograph was dated 10 months earlier, 2 months before she had submitted her application to the Callahan estate. It showed her leaving a grocery store near her apartment. Another showed her boarding a city bus. Another showed her outside a small cemetery on the south side. Vincent looked at Danielle. This time there was no accusation in his eyes. Only calculation. Who was buried there, he asked. Danielle stared at the photograph. My father. Mercer enlarged the file information attached to the image. A name appeared beneath it. Marcus Brooks. Vincent's chair moved back an inch. The color drained from his face. Danielle noticed immediately. You know that name. Vincent kept staring at the screen. When he finally answered, his voice had lost its usual cold certainty. My father knew him. Danielle looked from Vincent to the name on the screen, waiting for him to explain why a man she had buried 6 years earlier belonged anywhere in the history of the Callahan family. Vincent rose from his chair and crossed to a locked cabinet behind the desk. For once, his movements were not effortless. He searched through several old folders before removing a thin brown envelope marked with a date from 21 years earlier. Marcus Brooks worked for my father, Vincent said. Danielle felt her fingers tighten against the arms of the chair. My father repaired buildings. He drove delivery trucks when work was slow. He never worked for your family. Vincent placed the envelope on the desk. That is what he wanted you to believe. Danielle's eyes hardened. Do not tell me what my father wanted. The words landed between them. Mercer lowered his gaze toward the laptop. Vincent did not react with anger. Instead, he opened the envelope and removed an old employee photograph. Marcus Brooks was younger in it, wearing a dark suit beside a black sedan, his familiar smile unmistakable. Danielle stared. He was my father's driver for almost 7 years, Vincent said. But driving was only part of the job. My father trusted him with schedules, property access, private meetings. Marcus knew this house before I owned it. Danielle remembered childhood evenings when her father came home late and smelled faintly of leather and coffee. She remembered the old brass keys he kept in a kitchen drawer and never explained. She remembered one sentence he repeated whenever she noticed something adults hoped she had missed. Rich men build rooms to hide money. Frightened men build them to hide truth. At the time, she had thought it was simply one of Marcus Brooks's strange sayings. Now the words felt like a door opening inside her memory. Why did he leave? Danielle asked. Vincent looked toward Mercer. Find the final employment record. Mercer typed, then frowned. There is not one. Exactly. Vincent returned his attention to Danielle. Marcus disappeared from my father's records. No resignation. No termination. His name simply stopped appearing. Danielle shook her head. He did not disappear. He came home. He raised me. Her voice softened despite herself. He worked ordinary jobs. He packed my lunches. He complained when I left lights on. Whatever happened here, he walked away from it. Vincent studied the old photograph. Maybe walking away was the point. Mercer suddenly leaned closer to the laptop. There is another file. A scanned property document appeared on the screen. It showed renovations to the West Wing 20 years earlier. One signature authorized the work. Another confirmed completion. Marcus Brooks. Danielle stood. Her father had known about the hidden room. More than that, he had helped build access to it. Mercer opened a second archive document. This one contained a handwritten note attached to the renovation records. Most of the ink had faded, but one sentence remained clear. If they ever start watching the house from inside the house, look behind the west wall. Danielle stopped breathing for a moment. Vincent read it twice. Your father left a warning. For whom? She whispered. No one answered. Mercer searched the file history. This document was accessed recently. Vincent's eyes sharpened. How recently? 3 months ago. By whom? Mercer hesitated before turning the screen. An authorization code appeared beside the access record. Vincent recognized it immediately. Danielle saw recognition cross his face. Ethan, he said. The room went silent. 11 years of loyalty had just been reduced to one name on a screen. But Danielle kept staring at the document. Something bothered her. Ethan had accessed a warning that pointed directly toward the secret room, yet the room itself contained evidence that made Ethan look guilty. It was too neat, too convenient. Danielle leaned toward the screen. Wait. Vincent looked at her. What? Her eyes remained on the access record. If Ethan wanted that room hidden, why would he leave a trail that leads straight back to himself? Vincent did not answer immediately. His attention shifted from Ethan's authorization code to Danielle, and she could almost see 11 years of certainty colliding with one uncomfortable question. Mercer leaned back from the laptop. Authorization codes can be copied, Danielle said. Can they not? Mercer nodded slowly. If someone had access to the internal system, yes. Vincent's jaw tightened. Very few people have that access. Then we should be looking at those people before deciding Ethan is guilty. Vincent studied her. You watched him pass a key tonight. I did. I also watched him leave evidence everywhere he went. The west corridor, the gray dust, the key, the archive record. If Mr. Cole has hidden secrets from you for 11 years, why would he suddenly become careless enough for a housekeeper to follow him? The words hung in the room. Mercer turned back to the files. Vincent paced once toward the window, then stopped. Danielle returned to the photograph from the hidden room in her mind. Ethan's movements had been obvious. The real mystery was everything that had happened around them. Mrs. Price knew the corridor was being used. Someone removed the burned paper after Danielle found it. Someone replaced Danielle's missing photograph while she was upstairs. That person had moved through the estate quickly, quietly, without attracting attention. The picture, Danielle said. Vincent turned. What about it? Someone put my photograph on that wall while I was upstairs getting you. That was less than 20 minutes. Mercer looked at her. Who knew where you were? Danielle thought carefully. No one should have. Then she remembered Mrs. Price's frightened face in the hallway. Forget what you saw. Danielle closed her eyes for a moment. Mrs. Price knew I was asking questions. Vincent reached for his phone. Danielle stopped him. No, not yet. His eyes sharpened. You are telling me not to question my own housekeeper? I am telling you fear and guilt are not the same thing. Vincent slowly lowered the phone. Danielle looked again at the digital copy of her father's note. Marcus had not written, "Look for the traitor." He had written, "Look behind the west wall." He had been directing someone toward evidence. Danielle stepped closer to the laptop. Show me the photograph of me from tonight. Mercer opened the image. Danielle studied it. She was walking through the front gates, carrying her work bag. Nothing unusual. Then she noticed the glass panel beside the entrance. A faint reflection appeared in it. Not a face. Just the edge of a dark uniform and a silver pin. Danielle leaned closer. Every senior member of the household staff wore a silver pin. Mrs. Price wore one. So did 3 others. Can you enlarge that? Mercer did. The image blurred, but the pin remained visible. Beneath it was a narrow stripe of burgundy fabric. Danielle froze. Senior staff wore black uniforms. Only one person in the estate wore burgundy trim. Thomas Avery, she whispered. Vincent's expression changed. Thomas Avery had managed the Callahan household for 27 years, first for Vincent's father and then for Vincent himself. He controlled staff schedules, maintenance records, keys, deliveries, and access to nearly every room. More importantly, he had been working in the house when Marcus Brooks was there. Mercer searched Avery's system privileges. The screen filled with permissions. Archives, security logs, personnel records, camera access. Vincent stared at the list. He could have copied Ethan's authorization code and moved through the West Wing without anyone questioning him, Danielle said. Mercer opened the metadata from the photograph. The file had been uploaded at 11:41 that night. Danielle felt a chill. 6 minutes before she whispered to Vincent. Vincent looked toward the closed office door. Where is Avery now? Mercer checked the staff log. His face went still. According to this, he left the estate at 10:30. Danielle remembered the photograph appearing on the wall after 11:30. She shook her head. No, he did not. Vincent looked at her. Danielle's eyes settled on the silver service bell beside his desk, something Thomas Avery answered every night without fail. He is still in the house. Vincent reached for the silver service bell, but Danielle placed 2 fingers against its base before he could ring it. If Avery believes you suspect him, he disappears before we learn what he wanted. Vincent looked at her hand, then at her face. Months earlier, Danielle would have apologized and stepped back. Tonight, she held his gaze. Mercer closed the laptop halfway. Then what do we do? Danielle looked toward the office door. Give him something worth staying for. 20 minutes later, the Callahan estate appeared to return to normal. The dinner ended. Cars rolled down the long driveway beneath bare November trees. Ethan Cole left through the front entrance after Vincent casually told him he was flying to New York before sunrise. The story was deliberate. Vincent would be gone for 2 days, and a confidential financial ledger would remain locked inside his study. Mercer created the false file, while Danielle carried an empty leather folder through the main hallway, where household staff could see it. Vincent placed the folder inside his desk safe, closed the office, and left through the front entrance with 2 members of his security team. His car traveled down the driveway and disappeared beyond the gates. But Vincent never left the property. 5 minutes later, he entered through an old greenhouse passage and waited with Danielle and Mercer inside the dark library across from his study. Midnight passed. Then 12:30. The mansion settled around them, old wood contracting in the cold, pipes humming behind plaster walls. Vincent remained motionless beside the window. Danielle listened. At 12:43, footsteps crossed the hallway. Slow. Familiar. A key entered Vincent's office door. Thomas Avery stepped inside. His burgundy-trimmed uniform was immaculate. He moved with the confidence of a man entering a room he had entered hundreds of times. Mercer watched through the secured camera feed on his laptop. Avery went directly to the safe. He did not search the room. He did not hesitate. He entered the correct code on his first attempt. Vincent's expression turned to stone. Avery removed the leather folder and opened it beneath the desk lamp. Then Mercer quietly activated the recording system. Every movement was captured. Every access code was logged. Avery photographed the false documents with his phone, returned the folder, wiped the safe handle with a handkerchief, and turned toward the door. Vincent switched on the library light. Minutes later, Avery stood at the far end of the dining room beneath the same amber chandeliers that had glowed over dinner. Ethan had been called back. Mrs. Price stood near the doorway, pale but composed. Mercer placed the laptop on the mahogany table. Danielle remained behind them, where household staff had always been expected to stand. Vincent did not raise his voice. Sit down, Thomas. Avery remained standing. I do not understand. Mercer turned the laptop toward him. The recording began. Avery watched himself enter the study, open the safe, and photograph the documents. His expression barely changed. That proves I entered your office. Using a code you were never given, Vincent said. Mercer opened another file. Ethan's copied authorization. The altered staff log. The photograph of Danielle uploaded after Avery supposedly left the estate. One by one, the pieces appeared. Avery's composure finally cracked. He looked past Vincent toward Danielle. Her father should have minded his own business. The room went silent. Danielle felt those words more deeply than any accusation. You knew Marcus Brooks? Vincent asked. Avery gave a tired smile. Your father trusted Marcus because Marcus noticed things, just like she does. Danielle stepped forward. Her eyes were steady. My father found the room. Avery looked at her. Your father understood what it was for. Vincent leaned closer to the table. And you turned it into a way to watch my family. Avery said nothing. That silence answered enough. Vincent could have filled the room with fury. Instead, he simply looked at Mercer. Preserve every record. Remove his access to this house and every Callahan account. Avery stared at him. 27 years of quiet authority ended in a sentence spoken barely above conversation. Then Vincent looked toward Danielle. For the first time that night, everyone else followed his eyes. The woman they had spent 8 months overlooking was no longer invisible. By sunrise, the Callahan estate looked exactly as it always had. Pale winter light stretched across the marble floors, coffee warmed in the kitchen, and the first delivery truck rolled through the gates shortly after 6:30. But Danielle knew the house had changed. Thomas Avery was gone. His keys had been collected, his access canceled, and every record connected to the hidden room had been secured for review. Ethan Cole had remained until nearly 4 in the morning while Mercer verified that his authorization had been copied. Mrs. Price finally admitted that Avery had warned her months earlier never to question activity in the West Wing. She had obeyed because she had been afraid of losing the job she had held for 17 years. Danielle did not judge her. Fear made people quiet. She understood that better than most. At 7:15, Danielle returned to the dining room in her black uniform and began clearing the glasses left from the night before. Routine felt strangely comforting. She lifted Vincent's whiskey glass from the head of the table and heard his voice behind her. "Leave that." Danielle turned. Vincent stood in the doorway without his jacket, looking more tired than she had ever seen him. "Sir." He walked toward the table and pulled out a chair. Not his chair, the one immediately to his right. "Sit down." Danielle looked at the chair, then at him. "I am working." "So am I. Sitting here is not part of my job." "No," Vincent said. "It is not." For 8 months, Danielle had polished that chair, moved it for guests, cleaned crumbs from beneath it, and pushed it neatly against the table after dinners she was never invited to join. She remained standing. Vincent did not command her again. He simply waited. That mattered. Finally, Danielle set down the glass and sat. Morning light poured through the tall windows, catching the silver and crystal around them. Vincent placed the old photograph of Marcus Brooks on the table. Mercer found more records. Danielle looked at her father's younger face. Was he involved with Avery? No. He discovered Avery was quietly collecting information about my father's meetings. Marcus warned him. When nothing changed, he helped create the West access so evidence could be preserved where Avery would not expect anyone to look. Danielle touched the edge of the photograph. Her father had carried that truth for decades and never brought its darkness home to her. Vincent continued, quieter now. Marcus left because he had a daughter. He chose you over this house. Danielle's eyes remained on the photograph. Somehow that sounded exactly like her father. Vincent leaned back. Everyone here believed power meant knowing everything. We had security systems, locked gates, cameras, people watching every entrance. And none of us noticed what was happening 10 feet from our own rooms. Danielle looked at him. People see what they believe matters. Vincent absorbed the words without defending himself. And we decided you did not matter. The admission was simple, which made it heavier. Danielle did not tell him it was all right. It had not been. She did not need an apology softened into comfort. Vincent understood that. I cannot repay what you did with money, he said. Then do not try. A faint expression crossed his face, almost a smile. What do you want? Danielle looked around the enormous room, at the table where powerful men had spent years speaking freely while workers moved silently behind them. Start noticing the people who keep this house standing. Vincent nodded once. Later that morning, Mrs. Price entered the dining room and stopped when she saw Danielle still seated beside Vincent. Ethan entered next and did the same. Neither said a word. They did not need to. Danielle rose when she was ready, not when someone dismissed her. She picked up her father's photograph and walked toward the sunlit hallway with her head high. Behind her, Vincent remained at the table, looking at the empty chair beside him. For years, everyone in that house had mistaken silence for weakness and status for worth. One quiet woman had exposed both mistakes without demanding attention, without raising her voice, and without surrendering her dignity. And that morning, the world remembered what dignity looks like.